Something strange is happening at Skinwalker Ranch, and tonight, its owner, Brandon Fugal, is finally breaking the silence. For years, the world has watched unexplained lights, radiation spikes, and technology failures play out on television. But now, Brandon claims the public hasn't seen even half of what's really going on. In a sudden announcement, he reveals new evidence, government pressure, and a discovery beneath the mesa that changes everything we thought we knew about the ranch. And if what he's saying is true, then someone has been trying to keep this hidden for a very long time. Subscribe, because this story is just beginning. When Brandon Fugal agreed to a late-night interview on a small independent live stream channel, nobody expected anything unusual. He'd done hundreds of interviews over the years, always measured, always careful, always respectful of non-disclosure agreements. But on this night, something was different. His voice was tense, his posture stiff, and behind him, viewers noticed something unsettling. The blinds in his office were pulled shut, and two security guards stood just barely visible in the reflection of the glass. Before the host could finish asking the first question, Brandon leaned forward and interrupted. "There are things happening on the ranch we were never meant to understand," he said. His tone carried none of the scientific detachment he'd become known for. "And we've been told to stop digging." Literally, chat messages exploded across the screen. More than 80,000 people tuned in within minutes. Brandon then recounted an event from earlier that month, an excavation near the southern ridge of the mesa. The team had noticed recurring spikes of ionizing radiation, the same kind that had hospitalized crew members in previous seasons. But this time, there was something else. A geometric pattern carved into stone 8 feet below the surface. It wasn't modern tool work, it wasn't erosion, it had symmetry. He paused, swallowing hard. "We transmitted the data to one of our government consultants. They told us to close the site immediately and destroy the documentation." The host blinked in disbelief. Brandon continued. "When we refused, 3 unmarked helicopters flew over the ranch. No transponders, no flight plans. That's not paranoia, that's a violation." He lifted his phone and held it toward the camera. On the screen was a blurry image, a perfectly smooth circular cavity beneath the mesa, surrounded by smaller chambers. "We scanned this cavern. Something metallic is inside," he whispered. The audience went silent. Then he dropped the sentence that would trend worldwide within hours. "We didn't discover it. Something placed it there." For the first time, Brandon wasn't smiling. He wasn't selling a mystery. He was warning us. In the days following that interview, speculation spread across the internet, but nothing compared to the information Brandon quietly shared with his research team behind closed doors. The object beneath the mesa wasn't just metallic. According to preliminary scans, its alloy composition didn't match any known industrial signature. It reflected electromagnetic pulses in a way that suggested it was designed to be found, but not easily understood. The team scheduled a controlled descent into the cavern. When technicians lowered sensors through a stabilized borehole, the instruments behaved erratically. Cameras glitched, thermal readings inverted from cold to blistering heat in seconds, and for a brief moment, a deep humming vibration rattled the equipment. One of the monitors, usually full of static, flashed a smooth outline, like a sphere inside a cradle. Then, everything went dark. Brandon ordered all gear retrieved immediately. One technician who had been tethered near the borehole surface complained of dizziness. Within hours, his skin reddened and his hair began to fall out in patches. Radiation sickness again, but this time faster, sharper. Unlike any profile the medical team recognized, the object wasn't dormant, it was interacting. That evening, Brandon contacted a federal liaison he'd worked with since the ranch went public. The response was curt: cease all penetration of the mesa and await further instruction. Hours later, the ranch's perimeter sensors detected movement. 2 unmarked SUVs idling near the property line. The drivers remained inside, headlights off, cameras pointed toward the gate. As word spread among the staff, fear took root. This wasn't like the usual UFO sightings or cattle anomalies. This was tactical interest. Someone, somewhere, knew exactly what lay under that stone. zone. "We're not supposed to be digging here," Brandon told his lead physicist. "But if we walk away now, we may never know who built it or why it's responding." That night, as the team reviewed the corrupted footage frame by frame, they noticed something impossible. During the static blur, the sphere appeared to move, not physically rolling, but shifting orientation, like an eye turning toward a sound. The room fell silent. For the first time, Brandon wondered if the ranch wasn't protecting a secret, but guarding humanity from it. Within 48 hours of the failed borehole scan, Brandon's inbox filled with messages from agencies he'd never directly interacted with before. They weren't threats, at least not on paper. Instead, they were offers, grants, funding opportunities, partnership programs, all designed to shift control of the research to federal oversight. Every document had the same concerning clause: full custody of all recovered materials. Brandon refused them all. That's when the phones started acting strange. Calls dropped mid-sentence. Texts arrived hours late. Ranch servers logged intrusion attempts from encrypted networks bouncing across continents. "Someone's probing our systems," their cybersecurity consultant muttered, tapping through logs with shaking hands. "They're not learning who we are. They're learning where we're weakest." Meanwhile, activity on the ranch intensified. At 2:13 a.m., motion sensors positioned along the northern fence triggered repeatedly. When security cameras rotated toward the alert, they captured figures, 3 of them, standing perfectly still beyond the property line. Their height, posture, and proportions looked wrong, too stiff, too symmetrical. After 15 seconds, they vanished behind a flash of static. The next morning, Brandon gathered his senior team. He played the footage without commentary. No one spoke. "We're being watched," astrophysicist Travis Taylor finally murmured, "and not just by people." Then came the seismic data. Sensors embedded across the mesa began detecting rhythmic pulses deep underground, consistent, timed vibrations occurring every 6 minutes. They weren't earthquakes, they were signals. When Brandon forwarded the readouts to a classified contact, the reply was chillingly short: "Stop transmitting data." Around this time, rumors began circulating among staff. Stories of ranch workers hearing voices echoing from the cavern during late-night spot checks. Whispers that seemed to speak directly into the mind without air or breath. A geologist reported feeling pressure in his skull, as if his thoughts were being pulled downward toward the mesa. He resigned the next morning. Brandon doubled security, but physical guards couldn't protect against what was happening next. The dreams. Nearly half the crew began waking in the night, sweating, claiming they'd seen a dark chamber with a sphere suspended in a pale blue glow. They described the same faint hum, the same vibration captured by instruments days earlier. Identical nightmares, shared imagery. "I've seen pattern correlation before," Brandon said quietly, pacing the command room, "but I've never seen shared cognition. Something is interacting with us, and it's choosing who." More than ever, the ranch felt alive, like it was studying them back. Behind the mesa, something hidden for centuries was stirring, and the world, without knowing it, was inching closer to awakening it fully. 3 days after the seismic pulses began, the ranch's airspace, normally quiet, became unusually active. Radar picked up a small aircraft circling the mesa at low altitude. It wasn't military, but it wasn't commercial either. The pilot ignored every attempt at radio contact. As Brandon and his security chief watched the feed, the plane banked sharply and descended. Cameras mounted on its underside aimed directly at the excavation site. Within seconds, alarms blared. The ranch's monitoring system detected a sudden spike in microwave radiation emanating from the cavern. The sphere beneath the mesa was reacting to the aircraft's presence. Then, without warning, the plane's lights flickered. Its engine cut out mid-air, and the craft drifted in a slow, controlled spiral before crashing safely into a field 2 miles away. No fire, no explosion. It was as if something guided it down. Federal vehicles arrived on scene before Brandon's team could reach the wreck. Agents sealed the site and confiscated all equipment. The pilot was escorted into an unmarked van and driven away. When Brandon pressed for information, he was told only that aviation protocols had been violated. No further explanation. The next morning, new signs appeared around the perimeter. Restricted flight zone, federal authority. facility. Brandon hadn't requested them. The FAA claimed it was for wildlife preservation. But wildlife doesn't ground planes. That night, ranch instruments caught a faint electromagnetic whisper pulsing from the mesa toward the crash site, a signal too orderly to be natural. Someone or something was communicating, and for the first time, Brandon feared the message wasn't meant for humans at all. The following week tested the ranch more than any single phenomenon ever had. The crew, normally tight-knit and resilient, began to fracture under the strain of sleepless nights, whispering voices, and unexplained health issues. Tempers flared during simple discussions, and arguments erupted over equipment placement, lab access, even meal schedules. Everyone felt it. Something was pushing them. Travis reviewed biometric data from wearable sensors the team had been testing. Heart rates were spiking at random intervals, usually when staff passed directly above the cavern area. Brainwave scans showed brief bursts of activity in regions associated with fear response and dream recall. Whatever lay beneath the mesa wasn't just emitting radiation, it was interacting neurologically. Then there were the compass failures. Every analog compass on the ranch began drifting, pulling toward the same direction, the excavation site. Digital sensors mirrored the anomaly, suggesting a magnetic field shift underground. When geologists tried to model the readings, the simulation showed an impossible shape, like a rotating torus of magnetism forming a containment shell. During a closed-door meeting, Brandon addressed the team. "The ranch has always been strange," he said, "but this is targeted. It's influencing biology, psychology, and magnetism at the same time. Something wants to be noticed." One researcher abruptly stood. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Or it wants to be left alone," she murmured. She left mid-meeting, packed her belongings, and drove away without waiting for her paycheck. As tensions grew, Brandon's trusted ranch manager quietly admitted something odd. Livestock near the mesa had stopped grazing and stood facing the rock formation for hours at a time, staring without blinking, like they were listening. Sleep deprivation hit next. Crew members reported jolting awake at exactly 3:11 a.m. every night. Security logs confirmed it. Motion cameras around the mesa pulsed with static at that exact time, down to the second. "You're all on edge," the government liaison said during a call. "Shut the site down." But when Brandon asked if the government had seen similar patterns elsewhere, the line went silent for a long, uneasy moment before the call disconnected. Late that same night, the ranch's surveillance tower detected movement on the mesa. In infrared, several humanoid heat signatures stood in a semicircle, facing the excavation. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. Their heat signatures weren't biological at all, more like faint electromagnetic outlines. When security teams approached, the figures faded into the rock itself. The next morning, Brandon made an announcement that stunned the crew. Despite escalating danger, despite government warnings, they would continue. "The world doesn't get smaller when you ignore it," he said. "It just gets darker." The team nodded quietly, but no one looked reassured. Whatever was buried beneath the mesa was changing them. And now, the ranch itself seemed to be choosing sides. By the end of the week, the rhythmic seismic pulses had evolved into something more complex. The waveform was no longer a simple beat. It now fluctuated in patterns that resembled data transmission. When the team converted the frequencies into audible range, a low, trembling hum filled the command center. It wasn't random. It rose, fell, and paused with eerie precision, like a message waiting for a response. Their signal analyst isolated the pattern and compared it to Earth-based communications. The spacing didn't match radio chatter, Morse, or sonar, but one thing stood out. The pulses repeated every 42 minutes. Exactly. Nothing in nature keeps time that perfectly. Worse, the pulses intensified whenever a human approached the excavation site. Heart monitors spiked. EEG sensors lit up. It was reacting to proximity, almost like curiosity. One night, around 3:11 a.m., the same minute the crew kept waking, the sensors detected a new anomaly, a faint ticking sound beneath the stone. It resembled metal expanding under heat, but the temperature readings were unchanged. Brandon and his physicist exchanged glances. "It's adjusting," she whispered. The next morning, they attempted to respond by broadcasting a controlled tone back into the cavern. For a moment, the seismic pulses stopped completely. the ranch fell eerily silent. Cameras froze. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the sphere answered. The return pulse surged with enough force to fry 2 servers and leave every screen flooded with black and white static. Embedded deep in the noise, someone caught a fragment of pattern. 6 repeating symbols outlined in geometric arcs. It wasn't language as we know it, but neither was it meaningless. As Brandon stared at the frozen frame, a chill ran across his shoulders. Whatever was down there wasn't just emitting signals, it was listening and learning. With the pulses escalating, Brandon authorized a second borehole, this time with a fiber optic camera small enough to slip through a crack in the stone chamber wall. The drill descended slowly, guided by precise telemetry, until it reached a hollow pocket beneath the mesa. The feed flickered to life. At first, all they saw was darkness. Then, the camera auto-focused, and the chamber walls came into view. They were perfectly smooth, curved, and reflective, not like cave stone, but like polished alloy. Stranger still, the surfaces were etched with repeating hexagonal patterns, each glowing faintly with a pale blue phosphorescence. As the camera panned downward, the sphere appeared in the center of the chamber, suspended several inches off the floor. It hovered in silent defiance of gravity, rotating just enough to reveal engraved arcs that resembled orbital paths. Every rotation caused the chamber walls to pulse gently, as though in resonance. Suddenly, the live feed jittered. The camera lens fogged from the inside, as if something unseen exhaled. In the control room, temperature sensors spiked plus 10 degrees in seconds. Alarms screamed. Then they heard it, a whisper. It wasn't electronic interference or wind. It was a layered voice, 3 tones speaking simultaneously, forming no recognizable word. Yet every person felt instinctively that it was directed at them. One technician stumbled backward, clutching his chest as if gripped by panic. Another dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, though no external sound registered. The feed snapped to white static. When the screens stabilized, the sphere's blue glow had intensified. The walls now rippled with shifting patterns, reacting like a living membrane. The camera began to melt, literally, its metal casing dripping as if exposed to intense heat, though thermals recorded only mild warmth. Brandon ordered the drill retracted immediately. For the rest of the night, the chamber emitted a slow, rhythmic flash, visible through cracks in the mesa. It pulsed like a heartbeat. For the first time, the team realized something terrifying. They hadn't discovered an artifact. They had awakened a system. Shaken by the chamber's reaction, Brandon halted all drilling operations and ordered a full electromagnetic sweep of the ranch. That's when the readings spiked again, except this time, they didn't originate underground. 3 distinct signals were detected hovering above the mesa, triangular in formation, only visible on specialized radar. Cameras pointed skyward, captured nothing but an empty blue sky. Yet, the instruments screamed. When the team tried powering down certain sensors to reduce interference, something responded. Every device rebooted on its own. Tablets flashed unauthorized logins. Security gates opened and closed without input. It was as if the ranch's systems were being tested. Suddenly, the same whispering tone from the chamber returned, but now, through the radio array, layered voices speaking in modulation patterns. Dr. Taylor noted they resembled pulsed star maps. The pulses grew faster the longer the equipment remained disabled, like a warning. When power was restored, the signals faded. The implication was chilling. Whatever was underground did not want to be isolated. That night, ranch animals refused to approach the mesa. Camera traps showed their silhouettes pausing, staring into darkness, then backing away. The sphere beneath the rock chamber dimmed, as if going dormant. Brandon realized shutting everything down only provoked a reaction. Observing, not interfering, might be the only safe path. But then, something happened that forced his hand. At 3:14 a.m., the underground sensors activated on their own. The chamber pulsed bright enough to illuminate cracks in the mesa, visible from the valley below. Brandon knew secrecy was no longer possible. And so, in a controlled interview the next morning, he made his announcement. "We've confirmed a non-human technology below Skinwalker Ranch. For the safety of the public. We're no longer calling this a legend. We're calling it evidence. The world froze, and the ranch hummed quietly, as if listening. At 2,000 frames per second, the camera caught something the human eye was never meant to see. A metallic blur tore across the mesa, half a mile in just over 1 second, before disappearing without a sound. Within moments, the air around Skinwalker Ranch began to vibrate, like the ground itself was alive. What Travis Taylor's team uncovered that night forced them to shut down the experiment, abandon the site, and question whether they had just made contact or opened something that was never meant to be opened. Make sure you subscribe, because tonight we're breaking down the terrifying discovery that made the Skinwalker team run for their lives. It started the way these nights always pretend to start: routine, clinical, harmless. High-speed camera specialist Burdett Anderson rolled back onto Skinwalker Ranch with a flight case full of gear that eats light for breakfast. Rigs capable of 2,000 frames per second, shutters sharp enough to catch a blink halfway closed. Every time Anderson shows up, the ranch seems to answer, and everyone on the team felt it. The subtle lift in the air like static before a storm. Dr. Travis S. Taylor walked the east field with him, tracing the invisible lines where compasses spin, drones drop, and cattle refuse to graze. The plan sounded simple on paper: synchronize rockets, tone generators, and high-speed optics. Then let physics do the talking. Out here, physics doesn't talk. It whispers, and sometimes it lies. They laid the grid like a surgeon preps a table. Cables snaked across frost-stiff grass, tripods locked, telemetry linked to the command trailer. The cattle formed a nervous crescent at the fence line, watching as if they knew the script better than the scientist. First pass, baseline measurement, clean. Second pass, micro anomalies jittering at the edges of the spectrum. Nothing you could swear to in court. Everything you'd remember in a nightmare. Anderson framed the mesa, field of view across the whole ridge, he murmured, then checked time code against the rocket ignition cue. The countdown cut through the cold. Fire, smoke, a needle of light stitching the sky. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then every monitor hiccup just once, like the ranch had taken a breath. On playback, the room fell silent. A metallic smear crossed the frame. No contrail, no shock collar, no thermal bloom, just a shape that traversed half a mile in a touch over 1 second and vanished clean. No thunder, no air ripped to shreds, just gone. Travis didn't cheer. He rewound. He measured. He watched the cattle surge as the object passed, not away from it, but after it, like they were pulled by something the human eye missed. "If this is noise," he said finally, "it's the smartest noise I've ever met." The baseline was broken. Curiosity was no longer academic. And somewhere beneath that sandstone mesa, the night pressed a finger to the ranch's pulse. And the pulse pressed back. By morning, the command trailer was quiet, except for the soft whine of hard drives spinning. The team replayed the footage frame by frame, eyes glued to the massive monitors glowing in the dark. The object had appeared for only 6 frames, barely a fraction of a second, but each one defied everything they knew about motion, heat, and light. It wasn't just fast, it was impossible. Calculations confirmed what Anderson had whispered the night before. The object crossed half a mile in just over a second, clocking speeds near 3,600 miles per hour without sound, propulsion, or air disruption. No sonic boom, no heat distortion, no signature of any known craft. Travis Taylor stood behind the monitors, arms folded, silent. His mind flashed back to the 2004 Navy Tic Tac incident, another object that bent the laws of physics and left trained pilots speechless. But what disturbed him most wasn't just the similarity, it was the reaction time. The UFO had appeared precisely 6 seconds after the rocket launch, not before, not during, after. "It's responding," he muttered. "It's waiting for us." They ran the footage through spectrographic filters. No chemical trails, no reflective surfaces. The anomaly absorbed light, leaving a hole where color should have been. "It's frictionless," Eric Bard noted quietly. "Whatever that thing is, it's moving through space without touching it." The phrase sent chills through the team. Outside, the Geiger counters ticked higher. The electromagnetic sensors near the mesa pulsed in the same rhythm as the rocket telemetry. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. The pattern had returned. Travis leaned over the console, jaw tight. "That's the same signal we picked up during last year's anomaly." The air around the trailer grew heavy, like static before a lightning strike. For the first time, they weren't just observing the phenomenon was observing them. Something above or beneath the mesa had recognized their presence and was now playing by its own rules. And Travis knew that once you get its attention, Skinwalker Ranch doesn't stop watching. By dusk, the team's curiosity had boiled into determination. They weren't content just to analyze the footage. They wanted to provoke a reaction. If the anomaly had responded to the rocket, what else could make it appear? Dr. Travis Taylor proposed pairing another launch with a range of tonal frequencies, broadcasting specific sound waves into the atmosphere to test for interaction. "If this thing is intelligent," he said, "we'll see it adapt." It wasn't arrogance, it was obsession. Out here, you learn that every answer drags 10 new questions behind it. Burdett Anderson set up his high-speed cameras again, each one pointed directly toward the mesa. Their lenses shimmered under the moonlight, catching the faint red glow of the recording indicators. The crew checked signal integrity, frequency generators, and launch synchronization one last time. Then, standing amid the hum of machinery and desert silence, they began the countdown. 3, 2, 1, ignition. The rockets screamed skyward, leaving glowing trails across the Utah night. Seconds later, Eric Bard initiated the sound sweep. Tones so deep they made the air feel thick, vibrating through bone. The frequencies rippled out across the mesa, bending into the canyon beyond. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then, the static returned. Every monitor in the command trailer flickered at once. The spectrum analyzer showed sharp peaks at random intervals. Anderson's voice cracked through the comms. "We've got movement, east field, 400 feet above ground level." The team rushed to the screens. There, on infrared, a faint orb shimmered, then solidified into a defined shape, metallic and smooth. It appeared only for a heartbeat, slicing across the frame at impossible speed before vanishing behind the mesa. But that was all it took. The cameras, sensors, and recording devices had captured it again. Another object, same trajectory, same speed, same reaction to their test. "It's responding to sound," Travis whispered. "We're calling it, and it's calling back." A heavy silence followed. Outside, the cattle bellowed as the ground trembled softly beneath their feet. For the first time, the team realized the ranch wasn't a location they were studying. It was an organism studying them back. The night after the second sighting, the air around the ranch hung unnaturally still. The usual desert wind had died, leaving behind a silence so deep it pressed against the eardrums. Every sensor was calibrated, every instrument armed. They wanted to repeat the phenomenon, prove it wasn't coincidence. At exactly 9:03 p.m., Eric Bard powered up the tone generator again, cycling through a sweep of frequencies that climbed higher and higher. Within seconds, the hum became physical, a low vibration crawling up their legs and into their chests. At first, the vibration was faint, like the earth was exhaling. But then, something changed. The ground under the east field began pulsing rhythmically. 3 beats, a pause, 3 beats. The same coded pattern they'd captured on the electromagnetic spectrum now rippled through the dirt itself. "Kill the tone," Travis ordered. Eric cut the generator, yet the vibrations didn't stop. Monitors flashed red as seismographs spiked across every channel. The team scrambled to check their equipment, but everything was operating normally. The tremors weren't mechanical, they were environmental. "It's echoing back at us," Eric whispered. "The ground's responding." Travis felt his pulse sync with the rhythm. He didn't like it. Outside, the animals were losing their minds. The cattle bellowed and ran in circles. Birds scattered from the trees as dogs howled toward the mesa. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped 10 degrees in under a minute. Breath fogged in the air. Radiation sensors ticked upward. The hum deepened, no longer just vibration, but resonance. It wasn't sound anymore, it was presence. Anderson's cameras picked it up first, a faint distortion in the darkness above the mesa, like rippling heat waves bending the starlight. As they watched, the shimmer expanded outward, forming a translucent dome across the east field before collapsing back into itself. When it vanished, so did the tremors. Silence. The monitors stilled, and the readings leveled out as though nothing had happened. But everyone in that trailer felt it, that electric wrongness that doesn't fade, when the data ends. Travis looked out into the dark and said, "We didn't start a reaction. We woke one up." The following morning, exhaustion hung over the team like a fog. Coffee cups, radiation charts, and still frames littered the control room. No one spoke much. The memory of the ground moving under their boots was still too fresh. As they reviewed the data, local historian Thomas Winterton entered quietly with a handful of old records, maps, tribal accounts, and journals collected from the nearby Ute reservation. "You should hear this," he said. He explained that long before settlers arrived, the Ute people had forbidden this land. They called it a gateway, guarded by what they described as beings of smoke and shadow. In some of the oldest stories, the medicine men spoke of sound gates, tones and chants that could open invisible doors across the mesa. Frequencies weren't technology to them, they were ritual. Those who misused them, the elders said, vanished into the light. As Thomas read, Eric compared the numbers. "Our frequency sweep last night peaked at exactly 192 hertz. Thomas paused, then showed him a line from an 1800s translation of a Ute song. The tone that summons watchers from the sky. The documented pitch, roughly 190 hertz. The coincidence was too sharp to ignore. Had they replicated a frequency not heard on this land for centuries? Travis rubbed his temples. So what we thought was science might be something older than science. That night, they ran the footage again. As the 192 hertz tone played back through the speakers, the same glow appeared, an orb hovering just above the mesa, pulsing softly in time with the frequency. It didn't dart like the craft before. It listened. "I think it's waiting for something," Anderson said. Travis stared at the screen, or someone. Outside, thunder rolled in from the west, though the weather radar showed clear skies. For a brief moment, the orb on screen flickered brighter, almost human in shape, then vanished, leaving a faint echo of the frequency still buzzing through the speakers. Thomas's words rang in Travis's mind long after. "Sound opens the gates, but not all that comes through will leave." By the third night, even the veterans on the team were uneasy. Every instrument on the ranch was acting strangely. Batteries drained faster than normal, compasses spun erratically, and drones lost GPS the moment they flew over the mesa. Still, Travis Taylor refused to stop. "If we walk away now," he said, "we'll never know what's inside that signal." He ordered a final test, a synchronized launch of rockets, timed with a full-range sweep of tonal frequencies, stretching from subsonic rumbles to piercing ultrasonic tones. If something was responding to them, this would provoke it. The crew assembled in the east field under a colorless moon. The desert felt wrong, still, tense, like the earth was holding its breath. Anderson set up the 2,000 frames per second cameras, while Eric fine-tuned the tone generator. "We'll push through every band, one after another," he said. "If something's waiting, it'll show itself." Travis gave the nod. 3, 2, 1. Launch! The rockets tore upward in a blaze of light, vanishing into the black. The sound generator kicked in, the frequencies crawling up through the air like invisible fingers. Seconds later, every monitor flashed white. "Contact!" Eric shouted. On thermal view, a massive object shimmered above the mesa, oval, rotating, faintly translucent. The team watched in stunned silence as it drifted across the horizon. Then, the laser tracking system glitched. "The beams are bending," Anderson said. The live feed showed the targeting lasers curving upward, defying every law of optics. The object pulsed 3 times, paused, then 3 more, mimicking the code they'd seen all week. "It's signaling," Travis whispered. A blinding flash followed, and the power cut instantly. For 20 full seconds, they sat in darkness. The only sound, the distant howling of coyotes and the ticking of cooling metal. When the lights flickered back on, the object was gone. But the radiation detectors had recorded a spike, short, intense, and concentrated directly over the mesa. Travis exhaled, barely audible. "We didn't see into the sky tonight," he said. "The sky opened and looked back at us." The following day, the ranch was silent. No wind, no birds, not even the buzz of insects. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath. The crew gathered in the command trailer, reviewing what little data survived the blackout. But the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Files corrupted mid-transfer. Cameras had recorded when no one pressed record. One frame, frozen in static, showed tall shapes, thin, towering figures standing on the mesa ridge, half obscured by the haze. For a full minute, no one spoke. Travis Taylor zoomed in slowly, pulse quickening. "Those aren't artifacts," he muttered. "That's depth, that's real distance." But before they could analyze further, the power flickered again. A low, pulsing hum filled the room, the same rhythm they'd been hearing for weeks. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Eric grabbed the radiation monitor. The readings were climbing fast. "We're in a spike again," he warned. Then one of the crew, Anderson's assistant, collapsed, clutching his ears and screaming, "Make it stop! It's in my head!" The hum had somehow bypassed the equipment and was resonating through the human body itself. Travis knelt beside him, shouting for the generator to shut down, but it was already off. The tone wasn't coming from any machine. It was coming from the environment. The entire trailer began to vibrate in sync with the pulse. Drinks rattled, cameras shook, and then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The assistant was conscious, but trembling, his pupils dilated. When asked what he heard, he said a single word: "Observe." The word sent a chill through everyone present. It was the same one the sound engineers had isolated from the distorted footage days earlier. They were being watched, not metaphorically, not in theory, but directly. Something intelligent was echoing their own experiments back at them, as if learning their behavior, adapting to their methods. Travis stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "We're done for the night," he said. "Whatever this is, it's not waiting for us anymore. It's inside the ranch now." By sunrise, every person on the ranch knew something was wrong. The atmosphere felt charged, the sky a dull metallic gray, even though the forecast promised clear blue. The tone, the pulse that haunted their data, hadn't stopped overnight. It was faint, buried under the wind, but every few seconds the ground gave a subtle shudder, like a heartbeat deep beneath the soil. Nobody was sleeping. Nobody was eating. Travis Taylor gathered the team in the command trailer, his face drawn and pale. "We're standing on something that's alive," he said quietly, "and it knows we're still here." While they debated one last scan before leaving, the monitors began to flicker. The seismic sensors lit up across the entire east field. The tremors weren't random. They were forming a pattern. Eric Bard leaned over the display. "3, pause, 3, he said, voice shaking. "It's communicating again." The moment he finished, the main trailer lights dimmed, and a deep, resonant vibration rattled every metal surface. Outside, the dogs began barking, and the cattle stampeded toward the fence line. Anderson sprinted to his cameras, shouting that the lenses were picking up heat signatures above the mesa. Through the thermal scopes, glowing orbs flickered across the horizon, 3 in a perfect line, pulsing in unison. Then, as they watched, a 4th appeared directly above them. "We need to shut it down!" Travis yelled. But before anyone could move, the radiation alarms screamed, red lights flashing across the control panel. The vibration grew stronger, humming through the floor until their teeth ached. Every monitor froze. For a split second, the live feed showed the mesa covered in a faint orange light, like molten metal shifting beneath the rock. Then everything went black. When power returned moments later, every system had reset. The footage was gone. The only file left on the drives was a single corrupted frame, the mesa glowing, the 4 orbs aligned above it, and the same chilling text written across the static. "Leave now?" Travis didn't argue. He ordered a full evacuation. As the team sped down the dirt road, seismic sensors on their laptops still pulsed behind them. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, like a warning or a promise. When the team finally cleared the property line, no one spoke for miles. The dust kicked up behind their trucks, hung like a veil between them and whatever they had just awakened. It was only once they reached the highway that Travis Taylor finally pulled over. The instruments in his truck were still chirping, soft, rhythmic spikes in radiation every few seconds. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses. The signal had followed them. Over the next few days, the aftermath grew stranger. The hard drives recovered from the command trailer were mostly ghostly blank, overwritten by white noise. But buried inside the static, Anderson found something he couldn't explain. At precisely 2:11 a.m., the same moment the evacuation began, a new file had appeared on every device simultaneously. No one had created it. It contained a single frame of video, a faint sphere hovering above the mesa, glowing in bursts of orange and white, surrounded by what looked like geometric runes carved into the air itself. The file's metadata listed its origin as unknown system. Meanwhile, the ranch refused to settle. Local ranchers reported seeing silent lights drifting over the valley that week. Residents in nearby Roosevelt claimed to hear a low, mechanical hum vibrating through their homes at night. One even described her cattle refusing to enter the pasture, as if they sensed the echo of something buried deep beneath them. Back in Utah, Travis gave a private debriefing to Brandon Fugal. He looked exhausted, hollowed out by sleepless nights. "We didn't trigger a reaction," he said. "We proved there's intelligence behind it. It's using us to communicate. With who? I don't know." He paused before adding, "But whatever's under that mesa, it isn't done." A month later, Travis went silent. The production team received an encrypted voicemail from him, his voice low and shaking. "It's in the data. It's learning. Don't come back here." To this day, the government has classified every electromagnetic log recorded that night. The 1.6 gigahertz signal, 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, continues to broadcast from the coordinates of the East Field. No one knows its source. No one dares investigate. But sometimes, when the wind dies and the valley falls silent, the ground still hums, like the ranch is remembering the moment it was disturbed, and every few months, the same pulse returns, echoing through the soil. A warning, or perhaps an invitation. Season 6 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch was supposed to deliver answers. Instead, it revealed something so disturbing that even Dr. Travis Taylor, a man of science, was left speechless. Beneath Utah's red earth, the team uncovered what appears to be a buried intelligence, something ancient, engineered, and very much alive. The ranch didn't just fight back, it warned them, "Stay tuned," as we break down the moment the mystery of Skinwalker Ranch was finally solved, and why that truth may be far more terrifying than anyone expected. Subscribe for more unexplained discoveries and real-world mysteries. It started like any other night at Skinwalker Ranch, cold, windless, and unnervingly still. Inside the command trailer, the hum of machinery filled the silence as the Luna Group's subsurface radar swept across the mesa. On the monitors, green lines flickered, translating the invisible depths below into tangible data. But something was wrong. The readings weren't random geological noise. They were organized. Each pulse of the radar came back with the same strange pattern, equidistant lines, stacked in parallel, moving toward the center of the ranch like veins feeding a single heart. Dr. Travis Taylor leaned forward, his mirrored lenses reflecting the monitors as his expression hardened. "These aren't caves," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "Somebody built this." The others stared at him, waiting for a laugh that never came. The air seemed to thicken, the trailer's temperature dropping several degrees in seconds. Then, without warning, every monitor in the room flashed white. The sound cut out. For a full 3 seconds, there was only silence, before the entire system rebooted itself. When the radar came back online, the pattern had changed. The tunnels they had just mapped were gone, replaced by blank readings, as though the Earth itself had erased them. "What the hell?" murmured Eric Bard, tapping the keyboard. "We didn't lose signal. It just deleted itself." Then came the vibration. A deep, bone-rattling hum rolled through the floor like a heartbeat beneath their feet. Caleb Bentz looked around nervously. "It feels like the ground knows we're watching it," he said. Travis didn't respond. He just kept staring at the screen, eyes wide. He'd spent years chasing UFOs, energy bursts, and inexplicable phenomena. But this was different. This was intelligent behavior, a defense mechanism. The lights flickered again. Static crawled across the monitors, spelling out shapes that looked almost deliberate before vanishing entirely. In that moment, every man in the trailer understood. They hadn't just discovered something buried under the mesa. They had alerted it. Whatever slept beneath Skinwalker Ranch was now awake, aware, and reacting to their intrusion. And as Travis muttered quietly to himself, "Something down there doesn't want to be found." The next morning, under the thin Utah sunlight, the Luna Group doubled down. Jeremiah Pei, the young visionary behind their advanced radar technology, wasn't ready to back off. His team rolled out a series of subsurface scanners that used frequency stacking, a method so sensitive it could detect air pockets at the atomic level. "If something's down there," he said, "we'll see it." But even his voice carried unease. The men knew the ranch had a reputation for punishing curiosity. As the new equipment powered up, the command trailer hummed like a living thing. On the screen, the Earth unfolded in layers, strata, fault lines, and voids. But this time, what emerged wasn't geological chaos. It was geometry. Beneath the mesa ran a series of perfect straight corridors, evenly spaced, each one connecting to a larger central structure. "That's not erosion," Eric Bard whispered. "That's design." The realization hit hard. Nature doesn't build in right angles. Someone, or something, had carved these lines intentionally. As Jeremiah expanded the scan radius, the voids revealed a lattice, a network converging beneath three of the ranch's most infamous hotspots: the triangle, the east field, and the mesa itself. The very places where cameras malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly, and UFOs appeared without warning. Travis Taylor stepped closer to the monitor. "These tunnels," he said quietly, "they're not random. They're laid out like a system, power lines or arteries." The more data streamed in, the clearer it became. Whatever was buried below was engineered for function, not chance. Then it happened again. The radar feed flickered. A pulse of interference hit the signal, sharp and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "That's biological," Caleb muttered, half joking. But no one laughed. The instruments began vibrating violently, and a faint metallic tone rang through the trailer, rising in pitch until the windows rattled. Jeremiah shouted over the noise, "We're losing coherence!" before cutting the power entirely. When the silence returned, everyone could feel it, that eerie, heavy awareness in the air, like being watched from below. Travis broke the tension with a voice that sounded less like a scientist and more like a man who'd glimpsed something he wished he hadn't. "This isn't geology," he said, shaking his head. "It's surveillance." And as the team exchanged uneasy glances, a chilling thought settled in. Maybe they weren't mapping the mesa at all. Maybe the mesa was mapping them. By the third night, the air around Skinwalker Ranch felt electric. Static clung to every surface, and even the ground seemed to hum with a low mechanical vibration. Inside the command trailer, the Luna Group ran a synchronized deep scan, layering thermal, magnetic, and radar imagery in one sweep. If the mesa had secrets, this was the night they'd finally be exposed. The first few passes came back normal. Soil density, mineral veins, fractured bedrock. But then, the screen shifted. A cluster of shapes began forming beneath the center of the triangle. At first, it looked like an error, a blur of overlapping frequencies. But as Jeremiah's team stabilized the signal, the blur resolved into structure. The readings showed a massive hollow void, perfectly symmetrical, buried more than 400 feet below the surface. Its walls were smooth, its boundaries precise, a chamber so large and mathematically clean it couldn't have been formed by any natural process known to geology. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the monitors. Travis Taylor adjusted his glasses, staring at the data. "That's not natural," he said flatly. "That's built." His voice cracked slightly at the last word. When they rotated the imaging, the true scale came into view. The chamber spanned nearly the length of a football field, with angular corridors connecting it to the same lattice of tunnels they'd discovered earlier. One of those tunnels ran directly beneath the metallic anomaly that had destroyed their drills years ago. The same spot where Thomas Winterton had suffered that inexplicable skull swelling. The pieces were starting to align in ways that defied reason. Brandon Fugal, usually calm and analytical, stepped closer to the screen. his face pale. "You're saying there's a structure," he said quietly, "a facility under my property?" Before anyone could respond, the screens flickered again. The chamber's image distorted, then pulsed with a faint blue glow, like light bouncing off metal deep underground. The equipment began to whine. Eric Bard shouted that the sensors were spiking beyond safe levels. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the image was gone. The entire feed wiped clean, replaced by flat static. Travis exhaled slowly, his tone darker than before. "It's active," he said. "Whatever's down there, it's aware we found it." And as the hum faded and the monitors went black, the team realized something horrifying. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a reaction. Something deep beneath the mesa was responding to them, like a living organism defending its own body. The next morning, Skinwalker Ranch didn't just feel hostile, it felt alive. The usual desert quiet had been replaced by a thick, heavy stillness that made every breath feel monitored. Even the wind seemed to stop at the mesa's edge, as if obeying invisible boundaries. Brandon Fugal described it best. "It's like the air itself is listening." Inside the command trailer, chaos was brewing. The Luna group had barely recovered from the previous night's system crash when new interference began to crawl through their instruments. Monitors flickered with phantom readings, timestamps looped backward, and GPS units started displaying coordinates that didn't exist on any map. Jeremiah Pay slammed his keyboard in frustration. "It's like it's rewriting our data in real time," he said. "Something's hijacking the signal." Eric Bard's voice cut through the confusion. "Check the EM readings." Travis Taylor bent over the console. His mirrored lenses reflected a growing spike on the screen. The energy was off the charts, emanating from the same coordinates where the radar had detected the underground chamber. "It's not just interference," Travis muttered. "It's a response." Then came the physical reaction. Every device inside the trailer, phones, tablets, even watches, began vibrating in unison. Loose metal objects hummed and trembled. A low-frequency tone filled the air, resonating through their bones. Thomas Winterton staggered, clutching his head. "It's the same pressure," he gasped. "The same one from before." Before anyone could move, the lights dimmed, and the entire trailer shuddered as if struck by an invisible wave. The temperature plunged in seconds, their breath now visible in the cold. Outside, motion sensors erupted. The monitors flashed with silhouettes, humanoid outlines pacing along the ridge, each one fading the instant a flashlight turned their way. Caleb froze. "We're being watched," he whispered. Travis didn't disagree. "No," he said, voice low and certain. "We're being warned." When power finally stabilized, every camera that had faced the mesa was dead. No footage, no signal, just static. It was as if the land itself had reached up and deleted the evidence. That night, the team realized they weren't alone on Skinwalker Ranch. Whatever intelligence was buried beneath them, or perhaps within the land itself, had drawn its line in the sand, and it was making one thing painfully clear. There would be consequences for going any deeper. By daybreak, fear had hardened into determination. Brandon Fugal wasn't ready to retreat, not after coming this far. He authorized the next phase, a full-scale DART aerial sweep, using deep atmospheric radiotomography to map what traditional radar could not. The device was mounted beneath a helicopter, designed to scan both ground and sky, to pierce whatever invisible barrier the ranch seemed to generate. The operation began under a storm-gray horizon. From the command trailer, the Luna group monitored the chopper's feed in real time. The data started smooth: electromagnetic density, moisture levels, air ionization. Then, within seconds of passing over the triangle, the feed snapped to static. Every line of data flatlined. It wasn't noise, distortion, or weather. It was absence. A void that swallowed the signal whole. The pilot's voice cracked over the radio. "I've lost my compass. Controls feel heavy. We're being pulled." The entire room went cold. On the monitors, the helicopter's lights flickered and bent, shimmering as if passing through liquid. To the naked eye, it appeared to blur in and out of existence. one moment solid, the next ghost-like, distorted by some unseen distortion in the air. "Pull back!" Travis Taylor barked, gripping the comm. The pilot tried, but the craft didn't respond immediately. Alarms blared, and the DART unit beneath the fuselage began to overheat, red lights flashing across every screen. Eric Bard shouted the temperature readings, 80 degrees Celsius and climbing, even though the helicopter was flying through freezing desert air. Then the pilot's voice came again, strained and shaking. "There's something pacing us. It's right beside us." From the ground, the team could see it, a shadow, darker than the clouds, matching the chopper's movements perfectly. It wasn't visible on infrared. It wasn't a reflection. It was following. Then, just as the helicopter cleared the ridge, the signal reappeared, clean, crisp, and perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. The pilot landed hard, stepping out pale and trembling. "It felt like we flew through a wall," he muttered. Inside the command trailer, Travis stared at the recovered data in silence. The readings showed something beyond comprehension. A vertical column of distortion stretching straight up from the mesa into the sky. A perfect cylinder of electromagnetic interference extending miles high, like an invisible tower connecting Earth to somewhere above. He looked at Brandon and said the words no one wanted to hear. "That's not nature. That's design." Whatever was hiding beneath Skinwalker Ranch wasn't just underground. It reached into the air, surrounding them in a cage of unseen energy. The team hadn't just discovered a barrier, they'd flown straight into it. After the chaos in the air, the team made one collective decision. If the sky was off limits, they'd go underneath. Travis Taylor authorized a deep Earth probe deployment into the heart of the anomaly, near the exact coordinates where the DART system had collapsed. The device, equipped with reinforced casing and heat-resistant sensors, was designed to transmit even under electromagnetic duress. But everyone in the trailer knew the risk. The last time they drilled here, the ground had fought back. The operation began in silence. The hum of the drill was low and steady, the data stream clear. Eric Bard called out the readings as they came in. Sediment, clay, fractured rock layer, depth 120 feet. Then the feed froze for a fraction of a second before correcting itself. A flicker that sent a wave of unease through the crew. Jeremiah frowned. "That wasn't lag," he said. "It's like something down there edited the signal." At 200 feet, the data spiked. The probe's magnetometer readings climbed past safe levels, and the temperature began to surge unnaturally, 10, 15, 20 degrees above ambient in under a minute. Then, the camera feed distorted, its view twisting into a haze of static and heat bloom. Through the blur, something metallic glimmered, a smooth, curved surface embedded deep in the rock, reflecting light like liquid steel. "That's it," Travis said, leaning closer. "That's the same signature we hit years ago. The chamber, the anomaly, the buried structure that refused to be breached." He ordered the team to stop drilling, but before the signal could be cut, the probe's temperature shot up past 90 degrees Celsius. Every alarm in the trailer screamed at once. Eric lunged for the kill switch, but the feed had already gone black. Then, without warning, the ground moved. A tremor rippled through the mesa, knocking tools from tables. Outside, dust rose in thin spirals as if drawn upward by invisible pressure. The team stumbled out of the trailer just in time to see a burst of blue light erupt from the drill site, a glowing sphere, silent and perfect, hovering 6 feet off the ground. It pulsed once, twice, then shot straight into the sky, vanishing without sound. No one spoke for nearly a minute. The smell of ozone hung in the air. The instruments were fried, not damaged, but erased. Every log, every data stream, gone. Travis finally broke the silence, his voice low, heavy with understanding. "That wasn't a malfunction," he said. "That was a response. Whatever was buried beneath the mesa wasn't dormant, it was alive. And now, it knew they were trying to reach it." The probe's destruction had crossed a line. The evidence was undeniable now. Skinwalker Ranch wasn't reacting by accident. It was responding with precision. Brandon Fugal wanted answers, but for the first time, even his confidence seemed to waver. "If that light was a defense mechanism," he muttered, "then we're not just studying the phenomenon, we're provoking it." Travis Taylor gathered the team inside the command trailer. The air felt heavy, the silence punctuated by the faint hum of fried equipment still cooling on the table. On the main screen, Eric Bard replayed the final moments before the probe went offline, frame by frame, pixel by pixel. Between the flashes of static, they could see it, a faint outline, spherical and perfectly symmetrical, embedded in the earth. It wasn't a rock formation. It wasn't metal debris. It was shaped like a machine. Jeremiah Pay enhanced the contrast, overlaying readings from the magnetic field data. The image sharpened, revealing a honeycomb-like pattern across the surface. Hexagonal grooves, too uniform to be natural. "It's manufactured," he said. "And it's massive." The room fell silent. The team's working theory turned darker with every revelation. If the tunnels they had mapped were deliberate and the structure beneath was constructed, then the ranch itself was part of something ancient, perhaps something still operational. Thomas Winterton broke the silence. "So, we're basically living on top of what? A reactor?" Travis shook his head. "Not a reactor," he said grimly. "A system." He zoomed in on the data streams they'd recovered before the blackout. These electromagnetic bursts aren't random. They're patterned, timed, like a heartbeat. The realization hit everyone at once. The ranch wasn't just guarding something. It was something, a living, intelligent mechanism disguised as landscape. Before anyone could speak, the trailer lights dimmed again. The EM meters spiked on their own, and the air thickened, vibrating with a deep resonance. Cameras outside flickered, showing static silhouettes darting between the mesas. Tall, distorted figures, humanoid, but wrong in proportion. For a moment, one paused near the fence line, head tilted, staring directly toward the trailer. Caleb whispered, "It's watching us." Travis didn't flinch. "No," he said, eyes locked on the monitors. "It's studying us, the same way we've been studying it." The thought settled like a weight over the room. Skinwalker Ranch was no longer a mystery they were trying to solve. It was a sentient system, ancient, engineered, and awake. And as of that night, it had finally turned its gaze back on them. By dawn, no one slept. The team had gathered under the flickering lights of the command trailer, surrounded by screens that refused to stay stable. What little data they'd salvaged painted a horrifying picture. The underground tunnels weren't random. They formed a precise geometric alignment beneath the mesa, connected by nodes that pulsed in measured intervals. The pattern mirrored something that shouldn't exist underground. A constellation. When mapped out, it aligned perfectly with the stars of Orion's belt. Eric Bard stared at the projection, his voice trembling. "This isn't construction. It's calibration." Travis adjusted his glasses, eyes fixed on the pulsating lines. "You're saying it's astronomical?" he asked. "No," Eric replied. "I'm saying it's a machine synchronized to the sky." The realization sent chills through the room. The tunnels, the energy pulses, the electromagnetic storms, they were all part of a larger mechanism. A mechanism that connected the Earth to the stars above, like an ancient relay still active after centuries. The blue orbs, the radiation spikes, the interference, none of it was random. It was all a byproduct of something operating beneath them. Then came the final confirmation. When the Luna Group's satellite data synced with the ranch's local readings, the resulting overlay revealed something impossible. The energy signature of the mesa rose in vertical columns, creating a funnel-shaped distortion reaching high into the stratosphere. The ranch wasn't just a hotspot, it was a gateway. Travis Taylor broke the silence. "Every time we dig, every time we scan, it reacts because we're triggering it. It's not passive, it's protecting something." Brandon leaned forward, his tone grave. "Protecting what, exactly?" Travis didn't look away from the monitors. "Maybe not what? Maybe where?" The words landed like thunder. The team wasn't investigating a mystery. They were trespassing on a boundary between worlds. As the sun set over the red horizon, the instruments went silent again. The mesa pulsed once more, faint but deliberate, as though exhaling after being disturbed. For the first time since their arrival, no one spoke. The data was undeniable. Skinwalker Ranch was not a place of random phenomena. It was a designed system, intelligent, aware, and reactive. And if the team was right, they hadn't uncovered the heart of the mystery. They'd only grazed the surface of something vast, something ancient that had been watching long before humans ever set foot in Utah's desert. Travis turned off the final monitor, his reflection flickering in the black screen. "We came here to find the truth," he said quietly, but maybe the truth was never meant to be found. Outside, the mesa rumbled one last time, a low, resonant hum, as if answering back. Then, silence. The morning started like any other on the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, cameras rolling, the crew preparing for another long day of experiments. But by noon, everything changed. Travis Taylor's van was found abandoned behind the mesa, its doors unlocked and its equipment still running. What investigators claimed they discovered inside that van was so disturbing that the footage was locked away and never aired. Audio files, photographs, and something else. Something that shouldn't exist on Earth. Before we uncover the chilling truth of what was found inside, make sure you subscribe, because this might be the most disturbing discovery in the history of Skinwalker Ranch. It was just after sunrise when the producers first realized something was wrong. The crew gathered at the base camp as usual, the Utah air still cold enough to see their breath. Every vehicle was accounted for except one. Travis Taylor's van was missing. At first, no one panicked. Travis had a reputation for wandering off before dawn to calibrate sensors or chase a lead on his own. But as the hours stretched and radio calls went unanswered, that familiar scientific curiosity gave way to a rising unease. Around 9:20 a.m., Caleb spotted tire tracks leading off the access road, heading toward the back of the mesa, a restricted area where the radiation spikes had once nearly hospitalized Thomas Winterton. Brandon Fugal ordered a small team to check it out while cameras stayed rolling from a distance. When they crested the ridge, there it was. Travis's gray van, parked half-buried in the red dust, door slightly ajar, hazard lights still blinking faintly. Though the battery should have been long dead, the air around it felt wrong, heavy, metallic, humming just at the edge of hearing. Caleb called out twice before approaching, his boots crunching on the gravel. The smell hit him first, sharp and sterile, like burnt electronics mixed with something sweet, almost chemical. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, the key still in the ignition. A digital Geiger counter on the dashboard flickered erratically, jumping between normal background radiation and bursts that would have required a nuclear source. In the back, they found a setup that didn't belong on a reality show. Monitors bolted to the walls, wires running into the floor, dozens of notebooks filled with equations that didn't match any known experiment conducted for the series. Someone, likely Travis, had been living in that van, sleeping there, working there, documenting something off the books. A single camera mounted above the rear door was still recording, its red light blinking like an unblinking eye. Caleb radioed Brandon, his voice barely steady. "We found the van. You need to see this yourself." When Brandon and the crew arrived, they surrounded the vehicle in silence. The only sound was the faint clicking of the Geiger counter and the low hum beneath their feet, as if the mesa itself was listening. No one could explain the symbols scrawled in white chalk across the back window, a spiral surrounded by 3 intersecting lines, Travis's handwriting, and just below it, a message etched into the dust: "Don't open the case." When the crew finally entered Travis Taylor's van under Brandon Fugal's orders, they expected more of his scattered notes and research gear, not what they actually found. Wedged between the driver's seat and the passenger floorboard was a small black recorder, the kind used for field notes. The red light was still flashing, meaning it had been running for hours after Travis vanished. Caleb pressed play. At first, all they heard was static, a soft hiss that built into a rhythmic clicking, like Morse code, but irregular, organic. Then came the voice. It was Travis, low, deliberate, and strained. "It's responding. The pattern's changing every time I speak," he whispered. There was the sound of movement, a door opening, and then something else. A metallic groan, deep and resonant, vibrating through the van's speakers. The crew froze as the pitch shifted into a higher frequency, one that made their earpieces crackle and their stomachs twist. Eric Bard, the team's lead technologist, recognized the waveform on the recorder's display immediately. It wasn't random noise. It repeated every 47 seconds, identical intervals, layered with harmonics that no natural signal could produce. "That's not feedback," Eric said, his voice barely audible. "That's intelligent." Next to the recorder sat Travis's laptop, still open despite the drained battery. Its last active window showed an audio spectrum analysis. The waveform patterns were symmetrical, mirror images folding into each other, forming shapes that looked almost like symbols. The timestamps told a disturbing story. Travis had been recording the signals every night for the past 8 days, always at the same time, 3:07 a.m. The same hour the ranch's surveillance drones went blind, and the same hour orbs had been filmed hovering above the triangle. As the team continued searching, they found a folder of unmarked thumb drives taped under the dashboard. Each was labeled in Travis's handwriting: Respondent 1, Respondent 2, Phase 3, Transmission Attempt. When Eric loaded the first one into his tablet, it refused to open. Not corrupted, but encrypted with a custom code. The second drive did open, revealing another audio file that played without prompt. This one wasn't Travis speaking. It was a voice, distorted, mechanical, and layered, repeating his words from the first recording in reverse. Eric ripped his headphones off, his face pale. "That's his voice," he said, "but it's not him." The air inside the van grew heavy again, static building on the radios. Brandon ordered everyone out. As they backed away, the recorder on the dashboard clicked by itself, unprompted, and started playing one last line. Travis's voice, trembling and distant, whispered, "Stop listening." It's listening back. Once the immediate danger of the audio devices passed, Eric Bard noticed a stack of Polaroids pinned against the inside of the van's rear doors. Dozens of them, all developed, each marked with Travis Taylor's small, controlled handwriting along the white margins. The first few looked harmless enough. The mesa at night, shots of the triangle field, what appeared to be long exposure experiments capturing faint light streak. But the deeper the crew dug, the stranger the images became. One photo showed an outline in the dirt, a perfect spiral burned into the soil, surrounded by 6 equidistant depressions like claw marks pressed into stone. Another displayed symbols carved into the canyon rock, faintly glowing under UV light. But it was the third set that changed the atmosphere completely. The sequence began with a photo of Travis's reflection in the van window, his face pale, eyes hollow, holding a small flashlight. The next photo, taken seconds later, showed that same reflection, except now a second figure stood behind him. It was human in shape, but wrong, stretched, distorted, its outline blurred, as if caught mid-vibration. The final image in the series captured only the figure, standing directly beside the van, one hand flat against the glass. Underneath it, Travis had written, "He followed me here." When Caleb spread the photos across the hood, Brandon Fugal's face drained of color. Each picture was time-stamped between 3:05 and 3:10 a.m., the same hour the transmissions from the audio files had been recorded. The pattern wasn't coincidence. Whatever Travis was documenting, it was communicating through both sound and presence. But there was more. Several photos had faint reflections that didn't belong. When enhanced by Eric using spectral filters, glowing eyes appeared in the negative space. Not white, but red, faintly luminescent, almost infrared. Eric froze when he realized the reflections weren't coming from the camera's flash or the environment. They were internal light sources inside the van. Brandon ordered the rest of the images sealed, but one slipped through. An unnamed production assistant uploaded a scan online, and within hours, forums exploded with speculation. Users noticed something chilling buried in the pixels, a pattern of dots across the figure's chest, arranged exactly like the triangular coordinates of the ranch's magnetic hotspots. "That's not an image," Eric whispered, examining the original. "That's a map." When the lights in the command tent flickered minutes later, no one dared to speak. The connection between the photographs and the phenomenon had crossed from visual evidence into something else entirely, something that felt aware. When investigators finally cleared the back of Travis Taylor's van, they found 3 heavy metal containers wedged beneath a tarp, each sealed with industrial clamps and lined with radiation warning stickers. The air grew colder the closer they got to them, as if the van itself itself exhaled something sterile and metallic. The first case was labeled in Travis's familiar handwriting, "Gamma response, do not open." But curiosity outweighed caution. Against Brandon's order, Caleb unlatched one corner. The lid creaked open with a hiss. Inside lay shards of blackened material that shimmered faintly under the flashlight beam, fractured, irregular, and warm to the touch. Eric Bard swept a handheld meter over them, and it instantly spiked into the red. The fragments pulsed, faintly vibrating, as if responding to the proximity of the human bodies around them. It wasn't just radiation. The energy readings came in pulses, rhythmic and patterned, mimicking a frequency, almost a heartbeat. Travis had kept meticulous notes beside the case. His handwriting was hurried, desperate. One page read, "The fragments hum only near the mesa. When removed, they fall silent." Another line below it was scribbled so deeply into the paper that it tore, "Material reacts to sound. 18 kilohertz equals response. Feels alive." Inside the second case, they found smaller, smoother objects, coin-sized metallic discs coated with residue that shimmered in colors no one could name. When exposed to UV light, they refracted into impossible angles, bending illumination around themselves instead of reflecting it. The instruments malfunctioned just trying to record them. Then came the third case. It was heavier, colder, and unmarked except for one faint word carved into the lid, "Heart." When they cracked it open, the air inside shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. Resting inside was a cylindrical capsule made of an unknown alloy. The moment Eric lifted it, every electronic device within 10 feet shut down. Cameras froze. Radios screamed static. The capsule vibrated for exactly 3 seconds. Then went still. Later analysis revealed that its mass didn't match its size. It weighed almost double what its volume should allow. Inside Travis's notes, one chilling passage explained why. "The capsule amplifies local field resonance," he wrote. "It doesn't contain power, it feeds on it." The crew backed out of the van in silence, their skin tingling, hearts pounding. The fragments, the discs, the capsule, none of it resembled any known human technology. And yet, Travis had been cataloging it carefully, as if studying something he already understood. As Brandon looked back toward the mesa looming in the distance, he muttered under his breath, "Whatever this is, he brought part of it back with him." The Geiger counter inside the van clicked twice more before going completely silent. Then, in that sudden stillness, every crew member felt the vibration again, deep beneath the ground, rising through their feet like the slow heartbeat of the desert itself. Hidden under the driver's seat, wrapped in a piece of torn tarp, was Travis Taylor's field journal. At first glance, it looked like every other research log he'd kept. Neat handwriting, timestamps, measurements, standard procedure. But as the pages turned, the writing shifted. The entries became erratic, fragmented, almost paranoid. The first strange note appeared 3 weeks before the van's discovery. "The mesa is not reflecting signals anymore. It's replying." Every few pages, a new pattern emerged. Strings of numbers, strange diagrams resembling constellations that didn't exist. One sketch depicted the mesa as a hollow pyramid, with tunnels converging beneath a sphere marked source scribbled next to it. "It hums louder when I whisper back." Then came the shift in tone. The sentences turned desperate, as though Travis wasn't documenting an experiment anymore. He was recording a conversation. "It knows I'm listening," one entry read. "The signal only stops when I stop thinking about it." Another, barely legible. "If you hear it too, it's already inside." The final 10 pages were torn and burned at the edges. Across the last full sheet, in thick black ink that bled through several layers, Travis had written the same sentence over and over. "Do not open the heart." Beneath it, faint impressions suggested something had been pressed into the paper, circular indentations matching the size of the metal capsule found in the van. Brandon Fugal flipped through the pages in silence before finally saying, He wasn't writing notes anymore. He was confessing. That night, the production crew swore the journal itself emitted a low buzz whenever left unattended, a vibration so subtle it could have been imagination, but no one volunteered to keep it overnight. It was sealed in a lead case before sunrise, and as Caleb later admitted in a whispered interview, "I think Travis knew the van wasn't just storing data, it was containing something, and he was losing the fight to keep it inside." As investigators prepared to tow Travis Taylor's van off the ranch, Eric Bard noticed something odd about the floor. The metal beneath the rear mat gave off a faint echo, hollow where it should have been solid. Kneeling down, he pried at the edge with a multi-tool until the lining lifted, revealing a hidden seam. Beneath it was a small latch welded into the frame, disguised under layers of dust. With gloves on, Caleb forced it open, exposing a narrow compartment sealed with heat-resistant foil. Inside lay a single object, a cube roughly the size of a human fist, wrapped in what looked like aged burlap. When Eric unwrapped it, the van's radiation meter chirped to life again, not in random spikes, but steady, measured beats. The cube was matte black, cold to the touch, etched with patterns too precise to be carved by hand. They looked like circuitry, but the material wasn't metal. It seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The moment Eric lifted it, every camera in the van glitched. The footage stuttered for exactly 3 frames before freezing on an image that none of the crew ever forgot. A flicker of blue light radiating from the cube like veins of lightning. Travis's notes, found tucked inside the compartment beside it, were even more unsettling. Object activates near the mesa, syncs to seismic patterns every 23.2 seconds. One line read, "Possible transmitter" or "containment key." Another note, scribbled in smaller handwriting, said, "When I brought it back, the hum followed. It's not supposed to be here." They placed the cube on a containment tray, and immediately every compass within 50 feet rotated toward it, not north, but down, beneath the mesa. When Brandon saw the data feed spike, he stepped back. "That's not reading as radiation," Eric muttered. "It's directional energy. It's signaling something." Caleb, staring at the ground, whispered what no one else wanted to say. "Then something's signaling back." That night, the cube was transferred to a secured case and taken off the property. The truck carrying it made it only halfway to the lab before the GPS failed and the dash cams blacked out for nearly an hour. When the vehicle arrived at its destination, the cube was gone. No signs of forced entry, no damage, just an empty case and the faint smell of ozone. When Eric reviewed the footage frame by frame, the final image before the blackout showed a faint blue flash filling the truck's interior, the same pattern captured in Travis's van. He paused the feed, staring at the frozen frame for a long time before muttering, "It didn't disappear, it went home." Later that week, Brandon Fugal authorized Eric Bard to review the van's dash cam footage, a redundant security system Travis had installed months earlier without telling production. The files were damaged, corrupted by the same electromagnetic interference that plagued every experiment near the mesa. Yet one segment remained intact, a clip time-stamped 2 nights before the van was discovered. At first, the footage showed Travis pacing outside the van, agitated, running his hands through his hair, muttering into a handheld recorder. He appeared to be alone. Then, he stopped suddenly, glancing over his shoulder toward the mesa. The audio spiked with that same high-frequency pulse from the cube, a tone that distorted the entire feed. He shouted something, but the words were lost in static. When the sound cleared, his voice was hoarse, panicked. "It won't stop answering." Travis opened the van's rear doors and leaned inside, half hidden from view. For nearly 3 minutes, he stood motionless, staring into the dark interior as if something unseen was there. Then his body jerked violently, as though hit with a jolt of electricity. The cameras glitched for 6 full seconds, filling the screen with bursts of white and blue static. When the image returned, Travis was gone. The doors were closed. The footage jumped forward abruptly. An unexplained cut lasting exactly 6 minutes and 13 seconds. In that missing window, no data recorded, no sound captured. When the feed resumed, the van's headlights flickered once, then off. The last frame showed the reflection of the mesa in the windshield. For just a fraction of a second, something moved, tall, thin, humanoid, its outline pulsing in sync with the tone still faintly echoing through the audio track. When Eric enhanced the frame, his hands shook. The figure wasn't standing in front of the van. It was standing inside it. Brandon ordered the footage locked away immediately, but before he shut the monitor off, Eric swore he saw something impossible. The figure's reflection tilting its head toward the camera and smiling. After the van was hauled away, Skinwalker Ranch fell silent in a way that unnerved even the most seasoned investigators. Equipment readings flattened. The electromagnetic bursts that once plagued the site vanished overnight. It was as if the land itself had gone still, holding its breath. But beneath that quiet lingered something heavier, a sense that whatever had been inside Travis Taylor's van wasn't gone. It was watching. For days, crew members reported faint vibrations under their boots, a steady pulse, like a buried engine deep beneath the mesa. Drones flown over the site refused to stabilize, spinning violently before crashing in perfect symmetry around the same coordinates where the van had been found. When Eric cross-referenced the data, every crash aligned with the cube's pulse frequency, the one that vanished from the transport truck. "It's syncing with the land again," he whispered. "The signal's home." Then, during a late-night review session, Caleb noticed something strange in the surveillance feeds. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the hour stamped on Travis's secret recordings, the van's parking spot began to flicker faintly with thermal light. No visible source, just a shape, rectangular, glowing at the edges, as if the van was still parked there, but invisible to the naked eye. The next morning, Brandon ordered the team to stay clear of that area. Yet, curiosity won. Eric set up a sensor grid along the perimeter, recording low-frequency audio across a 12-hour cycle. What it captured made his stomach drop. Beneath the hum of static, a faint whisper looped at irregular intervals. It was Travis's voice, distorted but unmistakable, repeating the same phrase he'd once written in his journal: "Do not open the heart." By the time investigators retrieved the file, the whisper had changed, evolving, splitting into two overlapping tones, one human, one mechanical. When slowed down, the second voice formed coherent words: "Still here." Brandon sealed the area immediately. The official report listed equipment malfunction, but the crew knew better. Weeks later, the van reappeared in a storage hangar miles from the ranch, delivered without explanation, keys in the ignition, battery drained to zero. Every surface inside was coated with a thin layer of ash. There were no signs of forced entry, just a single message burned into the passenger door from the inside: "It's not over." Since then, no one has spoken publicly about what they found. Travis Taylor returned to filming but avoids any mention of that night. When asked directly, his response chills everyone who hears it. It wasn't evidence, it was communication, and whatever it was trying to say, it's not done talking. The monitors began to flicker just as Travis Taylor leaned in to speak. The air inside the command center shifted, static crawling across the screens like something alive. Then it came through, a pulse so strong it nearly shut down every device on the ranch. But what they discovered next was far worse than any of them expected. For months, the evidence was hidden, encrypted, buried under layers of government silence, until now. Tonight, Dr. Travis Taylor breaks down the terrifying truth behind what they captured at Skinwalker Ranch. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to hear changes everything we thought we knew about this place. The night began like countless others at Skinwalker Ranch, quiet, cold, and charged with unease. Dr. Travis Taylor was stationed near the command center, surrounded by a wall of screens flickering with live drone feeds and electromagnetic data. The crew had set up an experiment to test for interference around the western mesa, an area locals referred to as the heartbeat of the ranch. The readings had been stable for hours, until suddenly every monitor flashed red. The instruments screamed as electromagnetic frequencies spiked into impossible ranges. At first, Travis thought it was a system overload, equipment failure from Utah's brutal desert cold. But when 3 separate meters began pulsing in identical rhythm, His stomach sank. This wasn't random noise. It was communication. Outside, the night erupted with movement. The cattle in the far pasture stampeded toward the fence, their cries echoing across the canyon. One of the thermal cameras locked onto a heat signature hovering 20 feet above the ground. It moved deliberately, pausing, rotating, then drifting across the field like it was scanning the land below. The team scrambled to track it, but every piece of equipment started to fail in sequence. The radar jammed, the Wi-Fi cut, even the backup generator stalled for a full 30 seconds. In the silence that followed, they could hear a faint, low-frequency hum, like an engine idling somewhere beneath the earth. Taylor stared at the pulsating graphs on his screen, realizing the impossible truth. The signal wasn't just interference. It was repeating with precision. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 more pulses. The exact pattern used in Morse code to signify distress, SOS. It's responding to us, he whispered. It knows we're watching. The realization rippled through the team. Whatever was out there wasn't random energy, and it wasn't natural. It was deliberate, intelligent, and somehow it was watching them right back. That night, Skinwalker Ranch would cross a line it could never return from. The following morning, the team gathered around the control station, still shaken. Travis Taylor replayed the data feed frame by frame, his face illuminated by the ghostly glow of the monitors. What he found made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The frequency spikes from the night before were unlike anything he had ever seen. Instead of random bursts, the energy waves formed perfect geometric patterns, hexagonal shapes, repeating at mathematically precise intervals. These weren't just frequencies, they were codes. When the data was run through a spectrographic analyzer, the results came back with values that didn't match any known man-made transmission. They existed in the terahertz range, beyond what most civilian instruments could even detect. The strangest part was that the same exact signal appeared deep underground. The sensors buried beneath the mesa mirrored the readings from above almost perfectly, as if the Earth itself was pulsing with the same intelligence. Travis's first instinct was to look for interference, maybe a feedback loop from a nearby power line or satellite, but there were none for miles. The energy didn't match commercial or military signatures either. It was clean, stable, and eerily consistent. "It's like something alive," Taylor muttered, watching the rhythmic pulses move in waves across the digital map. Eric Bard, the ranch's chief technologist, confirmed what everyone was afraid to say. The data wasn't a glitch, it was a response. When they transmitted low-frequency sound waves into the soil to test for geological feedback, the anomaly shifted its frequency upward, as though it was countering their signal. Within seconds, every piece of equipment monitoring the test overheated and shut down. Later, while reviewing the captured sound, Travis played back the slowed-down version. Beneath the static, there was something faint, something that almost resembled a whisper, a single syllable, stretched and distorted, repeating in perfect rhythm with the pulses. Here, the message wasn't random, it was calling back, and whatever was buried beneath Skinwalker Ranch had just made first contact. That night, the team set up a new array of high-sensitivity night vision cameras aimed directly at the mesa. Travis Taylor wanted visual confirmation of whatever was generating those frequencies. The desert air was still, the sky moonless, and the only sound was the low hum of generators echoing across the property. Hours passed in silence until one of the technicians gasped. On the live feed, a faint distortion appeared above the mesa ridge, a ripple in the air, like heat rising from asphalt, except it was cold outside. When they switched to infrared, the shape revealed itself more clearly, a spherical anomaly, almost transparent, pulsing in rhythm with the same 3-beat pattern from before. Travis leaned forward, staring in disbelief. The object wasn't emitting light, it was bending it. The stars behind it warped, their positions shifting ever so slightly, as though gravity itself was twisting. On radar, it showed up as a solid contact, Something physically there, yet invisible to the naked eye. Moments later, one of the surveillance drones flying nearby abruptly lost control, its camera feed spinning wildly before cutting to black. When they recovered the drone the next day, its onboard data recorder contained a few seconds of corrupted video. But frame by frame, deep within the static, something could be seen. At first, it looked like a burst of light, but when enhanced, the image revealed structure, a vast geometric mass hovering silently above the mesa. Angled surfaces, reflective patterns, and strange inscriptions that appeared to shimmer like liquid metal. The object was massive, easily hundreds of feet wide, yet it vanished from radar as quickly as it appeared. "That's not a craft," Travis whispered, his voice shaking. "That's a doorway." A sudden vibration rattled the command center windows, followed by an electromagnetic pulse that knocked out power across the entire property for 7 full minutes. In that darkness, several crew members later reported seeing small glowing orbs hovering outside the windows, silent, watching, moving in perfect synchronization. When the lights flickered back on, the distortion was gone, and the night returned to an eerie, unnatural stillness. But the readings on the monitors told a different story. The anomaly hadn't disappeared. It had moved closer. The morning after the blackout, the ranch felt heavier, like the air itself had absorbed the fear from the night before. Travis Taylor walked the property with Eric Bard, inspecting the equipment. That's when they noticed something wrong near the north pasture. One of the cattle was missing from the herd. The GPS tag on its collar was still transmitting, but the signal wasn't moving. When they found it, the animal was lying perfectly still in the grass, untouched, no signs of a struggle, and no blood. Its eyes were open, but glassy and lifeless. The other cows refused to go near it, forming a wide circle as if obeying some primal instinct. The closer Travis got, the stranger it became. The animal's hide wasn't torn or burned. It was flawless, but when he tried to lift one of the legs, it felt unnaturally light. A small incision near the rib cage caught his attention, a perfect oval about 3 inches long, as if done by a surgeon's laser. Inside, the organs were gone, completely gone. No traces of removal, no pooling, no blood, just empty space. The tissue surrounding the cut was cauterized, burned from the inside out. Travis radioed for the rest of the team. Within minutes, their radiation meters began spiking. The soil around the carcass was magnetized, and the air temperature dropped by several degrees within a matter of seconds. When they examined the animal with ultraviolet light, faint symbols became visible on its skin, circular patterns resembling constellations, glowing briefly before fading away. They collected samples and sent them to 3 independent labs. 2 refused to release their findings, citing anomalous biological properties. The third analyst, who initially agreed to run full DNA and isotopic testing, suddenly vanished, stopped responding to emails. His phone disconnected. The report he was preparing was never submitted. Travis later admitted that this was the moment everything changed. "We weren't dealing with just energy anymore," he said quietly. "Something here was alive, something that kills without leaving fingerprints, and watches us do the cleanup." That night, they placed motion cameras around the pasture. At 3:12 a.m., one of them captured movement, a shimmering distortion hovering directly above the carcass, as if feeding on the fear it had created. By the 5th week of the investigation, Travis Taylor had grown obsessed with one location: the mesa. Every data reading, every electromagnetic anomaly, every pulse of radiation seemed to point back to that massive sandstone formation that loomed over the ranch like a watchful guardian. Beneath it, the sensors recorded bursts of energy that matched the exact timing of the night they saw the distortion in the sky. "It's like something's buried there," Travis muttered during one of the team meetings. "Something that's waking up every time we test the area." With Brandon Fugal's reluctant approval, the crew brought in a drilling rig to sample the subsurface layers. The drill cut easily through the first few feet of soil, but then, at exactly 12 feet down, it stopped cold. The bit screeched against something metallic. Thinking it was an old pipe or geological deposit, they tried again, increasing torque. The drill refused to move. When they retracted the shaft, the tip was partially melted, as if it had struck something superheated. Eric Bard deployed the ground-penetrating radar, sending pulses into the mesa. What came back silenced everyone in the command center. The The radar displayed the outline of a massive rectangular structure buried deep inside the rock. The edges were too perfect to be natural, sharp right angles, hollow spaces, and reflections suggesting some form of alloy. "That's not geology," Eric whispered. "That's engineering." The moment they transmitted a stronger pulse to confirm density, every camera around the mesa began to flicker. The air pressure dropped suddenly, creating a low-frequency hum that shook the equipment trailer. Within seconds, a visible shimmer rose from the hole, like heat waves, but dense and fluid. The phenomenon expanded outward, passing through the cameras and sensors, distorting them as if space itself was warping. Minutes later, 3 crew members fell violently ill. One collapsed, clutching his head, claiming he heard a deep, vibrating voice in his skull repeating, "Leave this place." Another began vomiting blood. Travis immediately ordered the dig shut down and sealed the site. Later, radiation scans revealed a spike equivalent to a short-term nuclear burst, localized entirely around the hole. As they packed up for the night, Travis looked back at the mesa and muttered, "Whatever's under there isn't sleeping anymore." 2 weeks after the failed drilling attempt, a convoy of unmarked black SUVs rolled down the dirt road toward Skinwalker Ranch just after dawn. Brandon Fugal was the first to see them on the security feed. 4 vehicles, tinted windows, no plates. Within minutes, men in plain tactical gear stepped out, flashing vague credentials and claiming to be Department of Energy consultants. They didn't introduce themselves, and none of them spoke directly to the cameras. Travis Taylor arrived moments later, demanding to know why they were there. The lead agent calmly replied, "We're here to collect hazardous material." They moved with precision, heading straight for the command center. Without permission, they began disconnecting the primary data drives, the same ones containing the original electromagnetic frequency readings, the drone footage of the anomaly, and the mesa radar scans. When Travis tried to intervene, another agent placed a gloved hand on his chest and said coldly, "This data belongs to national security now." Within 10 minutes, the drives were packed into metal cases and loaded into the back of the SUVs. The men refused to answer further questions and left as abruptly as they arrived, disappearing down the dirt road toward the main highway. Brandon called every contact he had within the Department of Energy, but none could confirm an operation taking place in Utah. One even warned him to stop asking questions. Later that evening, Travis sat in silence, staring at the blank screens in the command trailer. "They didn't just take our evidence," he finally said. "They took the truth." Weeks later, during a podcast interview, Travis hinted that one of the agents had accidentally mentioned a phrase, Project Blue Fold. It sounded eerily similar to the infamous Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's classified UFO study. Was this its continuation, a reactivation under a new code name? After that day, the official digital records from the ranch began disappearing one by one. Hard drives corrupted, cloud backups mysteriously wiped. Even personal copies that Travis kept offline started returning error codes as if the files were being remotely erased. The message was clear. Someone, somewhere, didn't want this story told, but Travis wasn't about to stop. "If they think they can bury this," he warned, "they've underestimated the ranch and me." By the time the team regrouped to review the evidence, Travis Taylor looked like a different man. The once confident physicist now carried a quiet dread behind his eyes. He spoke slower, measured every word, and seemed to flinch at the faintest static on the radio. During the televised debrief, he sat under the bright studio lights, staring at the monitors displaying the heat footage. As the clip replayed, the towering shape, the whisper, the pulse, Travis gripped the edge of the desk. His voice cracked. "It's not just electromagnetic," he said softly. "It's biological." The room fell silent. What he meant didn't fully register at first, but then he explained that the energy signatures weren't simply radiation. They behaved like living tissue, adapting and evolving each time the team interacted with them. Sensors recorded biochemical shifts in the air, traces of amino acids, organic compounds, even microcellular activity forming near the mesa. something alive was embedded in the phenomenon, rewriting the rules of physics and biology in real time. Over the next few nights, crew members began reporting strange symptoms. One technician woke up covered in burns shaped like geometric patterns. Another claimed to hear rhythmic pulses echoing inside his head. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. One cameraman described vivid nightmares of a light being standing in his room, flickering between human and inhuman form, whispering the word observe. He resigned 2 days later and refused to ever set foot on the ranch again. Then it got worse. Radiation detectors spiked without warning, electronics failed for hours at a time, and a black residue began appearing on the walls of the command trailer. Samples of it contained unknown proteins, similar to human DNA, but mutated beyond recognition. Whatever this thing is, Travis said, it's learning from us. It's adapting to our presence. The moment he said that, every screen in the control room flickered. The pulse pattern returned. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The same frequency that started it all. Only this time, the signal wasn't coming from underground. It was broadcasting from inside the trailer. The command trailer fell into silence as the pulse filled the air, vibrating through every metal surface like a living heartbeat. Travis Taylor stared at the monitor, frozen. The signal they'd chased for months was no longer beneath the mesa. It was inside their systems, spreading through every circuit, every feed, as if the ranch itself had come alive. The lights dimmed, and a low hum began to rise from the floor. One of the technicians screamed that the frequency was spiking beyond measurable range. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The hum faded, the air grew still, and the screens went black. When power finally returned, a single line of text scrolled across the main monitor, white letters against static. "We see you!" The message vanished before anyone could screenshot it. Travis sat there motionless, then whispered, "It's aware. It's been aware the whole time." In his closing statement to the network, he said only one thing: the evidence is undeniable. We are dealing with something that exists beyond physics, and it knows we're watching. Since that night, the data from Skinwalker Ranch has been sealed. Every document related to the event classified, but the 1.6 gigahertz pulse still returns every few nights, echoing across the valley. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Like a living signal waiting for someone to answer. And though the team no longer broadcasts live from the ranch, locals swear they still see strange lights hovering over the mesa after dark, silent, steady, and watching. Travis won't speak publicly anymore, but in one leaked voicemail he left for Brandon Fugal. His voice trembled as he said, "It's not done with us. It's calling us back. Whatever's buried under Skinwalker Ranch didn't want to be found, and now it may never let them leave."